Welcome to Backchecking the Bolts. Backchecking the Bolts is your cup of coffee to get you the latest on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Join host Jason Linkus and the managing editor of Raw Charge, Justin Godfrey, as they break down the Lightning's most recent games and go beyond the highlights, telling you what the box scores didn't. It's time to drop the puck.
It is Sunday, 8 o'clock in the morning. The U.S. is about to take on Canada for the gold medal in men's Olympic hockey. And you are also listening to Backchecking the Bolts. From his studio in Dunedin, Florida, he's the managing editor of Raw Charge. He is Justin Godfrey. Justin, how you doing today, bud?
Not too bad. It's a nice little Sunday morning here. A little bit of breakfast with the hockey as we watch Jake Gensel and Brandon Hagel face off for the ultimate locker room bragging rights in regards to gold medals in hockey. So, yeah, it's going to be a fun little morning here. How are things up in Pennsylvania, sir?
Not too bad here in North Huntingdon. Again, we had a little bit of snow here this morning, so I had to shovel a little bit of an area for my dogs. I have a 18-pound mini Schnauzer and about a 7-pound Yorkie. So the 7-pound Yorkie, 16 years old, doesn't move so well. So had to shovel the grass like I normally do and make sure she has a place to go to the bathroom. Told my wife I'm heading down to do the pod. And so we're ready to talk a little hockey. Justin, with the Olympics about to conclude, we have the U.S.-Canada final. Give me a quick prediction.
Oh, it's going to be it's going to be fun. Let's start with that. I think you got the two best teams are taking on each other, so that's always nice. Neither team kind of screwed it up on their way to the gold medal game. It's kind of always a fear of a team slipping up. Canada's probably had a few more nail biters than they wanted to, especially that game against Finland, where they went down 2-0 early on, managed to rally back for the 3-2 win. It's going to come down to the goaltending, honestly. I don't think either team is 100% confident in their netminders. You got Connor Hellebuck going for the U.S., it looks like, and Jordan Binnington in net for Canada. So it's going to come down to which one is kind of a little more solid in net. But Binnington's been Cooper's guy for the tournament and also Four Nations last year. Loves him in big-time games, so we're going to see if that pays off for Coop.
Justin, the one thing that I would say about Team Canada, they've played two teams, Czechia and Finland, who really played conservative. They tried to win 2-1, 3-2 hockey games. They knew they couldn't run and gun with Canada, so they played very defensive, very conservative. I think this is the first time that Canada will play a team that is going to be willing to play hockey with them. They're not going to be just sitting back and just trying to chip the puck out of the zone and hope to win a game where they're outshot 2-1 and win a 2-1 hockey game. I think this is going to be up and down. I think there's going to be scoring. I'm going to go US 4-3 in overtime. I think they're going to have a little revenge from the Four Nations.
Yeah, it feels like it's going to be a slightly more high-scoring game. Both case scenarios, you're looking at two teams that can roll 4 lines deep. I mean, Brandon Hagel is on a fourth line with Seth Jarvis and Bo Horvat. Those guys are top 6, forwards on each team. I think a little more offense for both sides coming through. So it is going to be hopefully a high-scoring game and just entertaining. Looks like the U.S. have the early pressure. Yeah, so it's going to be fun. It's going to be kind of last man standing, and I wouldn't be surprised to see 4-3 final either way.
Now, Justin, we talked about Girgensons and Mosier having really good Olympics representing the Lightning over in Milano. But Oliver Bjorkstrand just hasn't been quite what I think everyone expected.
Yeah, it's with Bjorkstrand, it was kind of just a microcosm of his season with the Lightning so far. He generated a lot of chances for Denmark. They just couldn't finish. And a team like Denmark, they needed their top 6 players to finish if they wanted any chance of competing with the Swedens and the Finlands and the U.S. and the Canadians. Didn't happen. Hopefully it's not negative for him moving down the stretch, because he actually had a really good week kind of before before the Olympic break, he was finding the net again for the Lightning. They do need him down the stretch. They're still looking for that kind of second line winger that can put some goals in the net, and they need him to be that guy, or else BriseBois has to go out on the trade market and fill that hole, which they probably don't want to do at this point.
When it comes to the trade deadline, which comes up on the 6th, how much cap space do the Lightning have heading into the trade deadline?
It's really kind of hard to determine sometimes, just with the way they've been in and out of long-term injury reserve. So what we're looking at, on Puckpedia, I think there was about $3 million or so last time I checked in regards to cap space. They do have the room, but if they want to bring in a big name, they're probably going to have to move someone. Bjorkstrom's name has come up as the player out if they bring in a bigger name in. There is a little bit of flexibility. Again, I don't think BriseBois is going to do too much tinkering. He really likes the way the team's been playing. He likes their 5-on-5 play. He likes their defensive play. And there is an argument to be made for chemistry over productivity. But with him, his big thing is he doesn't want to leave anything on the table if he thinks the team has a chance to win. So right now, I think their focus may be on strengthening the defense, especially if Hedman is hurt, more than, say, a couple games here or there. You definitely want to add some depth to that blue line.
Well, the trade deadline is coming up. Last episode, we talked about the best and worst trades the Lightning made pretty much through 2008. On this episode, we're going to talk about the best and worst trades of the Yzerman BriseBois era. Now, Steve Yzerman was the general manager for the Lightning from 2010 to 2018, and Julien BriseBois took over from him. So in this analysis of 15 years, there's only 2 general managers to look at, and both with excellent track records. So, Justin, just like I asked you last time, do you want to start best or do you want to start worst?
Oh, let's go ahead and let's start with the negative. Why don't we do that again? So let's go ahead and start off with the worst. And honestly, it's really hard to pick out what I would call worst or bad trades for the Lightning. Everything kind of taking in context, the time that the deals are made, and what the Lightning were trying to accomplish with the trades. You can see reasoning for all of them. Now, they didn't all pan out in hindsight, and I think that's kind of where they get the reputation as being the quote-unquote worst trades, is when they just don't work out like you were thinking on. Yeah, I was going to say, we kind of went through and picked out a few, so we can definitely go over those and see what the listeners think about them.
Well, let's start off with the first one being Tanner Jeannot for Cal Foote, a 2023 third-round pick, a 2023 fourth-round pick, a 2023 fifth-round pick. But wait, there's more. It's a 2024 second-round pick, a 2025 first-round pick. For Tanner Jeannot, this was a huge deal. Tons of draft picks went from Tampa to Nashville, and this one just did not turn out as they had drawn it up.
Yeah, and this is kind of exactly what I was talking about. This, on paper, and for the longest time, I defended this trade. Pretty much the entirety of Tanner Jeannot's Lightning career. On paper, this is exactly what Julien BriseBois needed on his team. Jeannot was a big physical forward. He was young. I think he was 24 at the time of the trade. He was under team control. He was putting up points with Nashville, at least in his rookie year. This is the type of player that could have a long, prosperous career in the Tampa system. A system that does rely heavily on a forward check, with their forwards creating and scoring chances. Everything that Tanner Jeannot did, honestly, even with the Lightning, he was always on the positive side in regards to scoring chances, high danger chances, things like that. The big problem with the Tanner Jeannot era in Tampa is that he just didn't score goals. And part of that, and this is something that maybe you keep an eye on when you do some of these deals. With Nashville, his shooting percentage, especially over his first 2 years, was somewhere around 20%. And that just wasn't sustainable for him. And we found that out as he came to the Lightning. He came in, he generated those chances, he just couldn't score. And he ended up getting dealt at the trade deadline a few years later for a couple fourth-round picks. But in regards to the price that BriseBois paid for this, apparently, based on a little bit of research, the Nashville GM was looking for 2 first-round picks for Jeannot. There was a lot of interest for him at the time. Again, he's a younger player, big physical guy. So other teams in the league wanted it. BriseBois didn't really have 2 first-round picks at the time, so they kind of hammered out this, 752 picks for Tanner Jeannot kind of deal. For me, in hindsight, the biggest thing with this is that it just depletes so much of BriseBois' trade capital. He just couldn't make any deals after this. In my opinion, probably the worst trade of his era so far. He's done so many of these trades where he's overpaid for players that have worked out in the past that you kind of thought they would all work out. And sometimes on a deal like this, if it doesn't work out, it's just really, really glaringly obvious when it doesn't. And that's what this ended up being.
Well, the Bolts would send Jeannot to Los Angeles for a 24 fourth-round pick and a 25 second-round pick. So by trading him down the road, they were able to get a little bit back for him. But Tanner Jeannot never really became the NHL player that many envisioned. Right now, he's with Boston. In the offseason, he signed a 5-year, $17 million deal. He has 6 goals, 14 assists in 53 games. So this is pretty much who he is now. He's your back end, probably third line guy that might jump up to the second line if there's an injury or two. But he never filled it. He never became the NHLer that many general managers thought.
Yeah, he never became that top 6 kind of power forward that folks were hoping for. He had his time in Nashville, he had his time in Tampa, LA for a little bit, and now he's over in Boston. I think he's doing, for his role in Boston, he's doing pretty good. But again, he's also making $3 million a year or something like that. So he's going to find his role, but for the price that the Lightning paid for it, it just didn't work out, and that's unfortunate. But we all move on, and the Lightning have kind of reassembled a pretty strong team in the wake of the Tanner Jeannot crisis.
And speaking of moving on, we're going to move on to our next trade. And this once again involves the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Nashville Predators. It was Anders Lindback, Kyle Wilson, a 2012 7th-round pick, 4 multiple 2012 second-round picks, a 2013 3rd-round pick, and Sebastian Caron. Justin, this trade was made in the offseason in 2012. Give us the recap.
Yeah, so this is under the Steve Yzerman era. It's kind of his first real big swing for a goaltender here. The list of Lightning goaltenders prior to Lindback and prior to the Ben Bishop, Andrei Vasilevsky era, it's not exactly pretty. You had Dan Ellis. This is basically goaltenders who played 20 games or more under the Yzerman era, which is roughly 2010 to 2018. So you had at the top, you have Bishop and Vasilevsky, of course. But other than that, you had Dan Ellis, who played 31 games. You had Mike Smith, who played 22 games. Dwayne Roloson, the clubhouse leader, was 74. Matthew Garon was 68. And then Lindback came in at 47. It really was kind of a collection of, this guy may be good kind of goaltenders to, aging veterans like Roloson, who did have that magical run with the Lightning that took him to the Eastern Conference Finals. So Yzerman really struggled to find that steady influence in that. They weren't developing goaltenders at the time. He had made a couple trades, a couple free agent signings that weren't working out. So he makes this big splash for Lindback, who was a young netminder in Nashville, kind of stuck behind a couple of their goaltenders. The big deal with this is kind of like the Jeannot trade. It's a lot of assets to trade for an unproven player. Lindback hadn't been a starter. He comes over to the Lightning. They throw him in as the number 1 starter right away. It doesn't work out. Yzerman ends up having to make another deal, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But yeah, Anders Lindback, he's this young kid. He's raw. He's extremely athletic, but his positioning, kind of some of his skills never kind of translated. You saw potential there. He just never lived up to it. And perhaps the Lightning kind of forced him into being a number 1 when he needed some more seasoning. So it just doesn't work out. Not all trades are going to work out, even under the Yzerman era where it seemed like he was working with magic all the time. So yeah, probably one of his least productive trades, we'll put it, in regards to what they gave up for him. There could have been some other options he may have gone with at the time. But yeah, this one just didn't quite work out, much like the Jeannot trade. Something with Nashville where we send them all these picks and we get players that just don't work out for the Lightning.
Lindback would be released by the Bolts. He would sign with Dallas, but he pretty much had a fledgling NHL career. But one key stat about Anders Lindback, he holds the record for the shortest time played by a participant In the Ice Hockey World Championships, he played 1 second in Sweden's win against Germany in the 2010 bronze medal game.
That's why you listen to this podcast, folks, for nuggets of information just like that. I had no idea, but hey, great job on the research over there, Mr. Lucas.
All I say is 1 second. Would someone get kicked out of a face-off and they took him right back out of the game?
Probably, yeah. It sounds like one of those where, the starting goaltender has to go tie his laces or something like that. And, you get one face-off, the whistle's blown, and right back in. So
either that or maybe at the end.
Yeah, Brandon Halverson's 17-second stint this year earlier in the year for the Lightning, where he was in for a face-off or two and then quickly went back out. So
now let's take a look at our third bad trade. Bolts sent a 2027 fifth-round pick to Arizona for Matt Dumba and a 2025 seventh-round pick. This trade was made at the trade deadline in 2024. Justin, the Bolts are looking for a little bit of muscle and some offensive capabilities on the blue line, but this one just never meshed.
Yeah, to me, again, like a fifth-round pick, it's the most lottery of lottery tickets, right? It's not a high round pick. It's not going to be an impact player most likely. But for me, the reason I included this one on this list, it seems so out of proportion or out of style for Julien BriseBois. I mean, he's trading for Matt Dumba, who was an unrestricted free agent. One of BriseBois' central tenets when he's making these deals is he loves to get players that are under control for this season and the next. His philosophy is, I want to make this team better now and in the future. Dumba wasn't that. The Lightning were also struggling at 5-on-5 play, and they were struggling defensively. Neither one of those aspects is something that Matt Dumba is going to help you out with. He is an offensive defenseman, especially at this stage in his career, and it just never panned out. I think Dumba's probably highlight with the Lightning, or I guess you would say low light, would be in the playoffs where he is staring at an empty net, backhands it right into Sergei Bobrovsky's paddle. To the Florida goaltender's credit, it was a really nice save, but it was just kind of a nail in the coffin for the Lightning in the playoffs that season, and that's kind of the Dumba highlight right now. So for me, the reason, like I said, I included this on here, just wasn't a BriseBois style trade, and I think he kind of lost the plot a little bit in that trade deadline. That's also where they brought in Anthony Duclair, who I thought actually played fairly well with the Lightning in a short tenure, but again, an unrestricted free agent with no protection as far as going forward. So yeah, those kind of things it was just out of character for him, and so that's why I put it on the list. Plus, it didn't work either. So hindsight being what it is, just not one of his better deals.
And Dumba's on the back end of his NHL career. Right now, he's currently in the American Hockey League playing with Wilkes-Barre Scranton. He played only 11 NHL games so far this year, 1 goal and 2 assists with the Penguins. But we talked about the bad. Let's talk about the good. And there's a lot of good in this era for the Tampa Bay Lightning. I want to start off with a trade that was made with the New York Rangers. The Bolts get Ryan McDonough, JT Miller, for Vladimir Nemestikov, Libor Hajek, Brett Howden, a 2018 first-round pick, and a conditional 2019 second-round pick. This trade was made just before the deadline in 2018. Justin, this got the Bolts off and running in their next run towards Stanley Cups.
Yeah, you're right. And this was kind of, if you look at the history of Lightning trades, it's kind of where the Lightning started with the all-in mentality. This one was under Steve Yzerman. It was actually the last big deal he did for them as a GM because he would step down later that summer. But you're looking at a team that picked up top 3 defensemen. JT Miller was an excellent addition for that trade. Kind of a bit of a surprise for everybody. There had been rumors that the Lightning were circling around McDonough, but Miller's name didn't really come up. So he added some pretty solid forward skills for him. The Lightning ended up re-signing both of these players. So again, it's that philosophy of it's going to help us now, it's going to help us down the road. McDonough became that cornerstone and shutdown defenseman for the Stanley Cup teams. Miller lasted for a little bit, and they traded him off to Vancouver for a first-round pick. There's a really good management of assets for the Lightning too. Vlad Nemestikov had been playing on the top line for a lot of that season, where he's skating with Steven Stamkos and Nikita Kucherov. So his value was probably never higher at that point. You had Brett Howden was still in juniors at the time. He had been a first-round pick for the Lightning. They sacrificed that other 2018 first-round pick, and then the second-round pick, which was conditional. It could have been a first-rounder, but ended up being that second-rounder. So it was a really good asset management from that point, where the Lightning filled two needs that both worked out. McDonough was a legend for the Lightning, even in both runs. They traded him for salary cap purposes for a while and then got him back. Miller helped them as far as bringing in some more assets when they traded him for the first round pick. And then, it also helps that New York kind of whiffed on both selections. I mean, if you look at who they drafted, that 2018 first round pick, they picked up Nils Lundqvist as a defenseman. Didn't really do anything for them. Probably his claim to fame is that he was traded to Dallas for a first round pick, and then the Rangers used that pick to bring in Vlad Tarasenko and Nico Mikola from the Blues for one of their runs. And then with that 2019 second round pick, they drafted Carl Henriksen, who's never played in the NHL. So when you see those picks kind of dissolve into nothingness, then it kind of makes you feel better about how the Lightning managed those assets.
You had mentioned about Nemestikov playing with Stamkos and Kucherov. He had a 20-goal season with the Bolts in that 2018 season, but he never replicated that throughout the rest of his career. Now, he's still in the league, playing with Winnipeg. He's had a nice career, played about 850 games, but his career high after that 20-goal season, he had 13 goals with Ottawa in 2020 and 13 with Detroit in 2022. So the Lightning probably traded him at his highest value because he played with Kucherov and Stamkos.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, that's just really good asset management right there. They knew what type of player he was, and he is a solid NHL player. The Lightning liked him so much they brought him back a couple years ago. But when you're looking to make that next step, and that's what the Lightning were doing at the time, they've gone from, hey, we have all this young talent, now we need to ratchet it up and become a contender in the league. And picking up a player like McDonough, you have to sacrifice, you have to crack some eggs to make the omelet, and giving up, Nemestikov, who was a solid young forward that had potential at the time, Howden, who was, scheduled to be probably a top six forward in the league. And again, like, he's had a solid NHL career as well, kind of as a journeyman depth forward. So you take these risks, you hope it plays out for him. For the Lightning, it did, and it did take him to the next level, because now they had that left side defense of Victor Hedman, who was in his prime. You had Ryan McDonough, veteran defenseman, former captain, and then a young Mikhail Sergachev on that left side, which kind of formed that nucleus of the Lightning defense that went to 3 straight Cup finals.
Well, Justin, let's move on to our next trade, and that involves a member of Team Canada playing right now. As I'm looking at my monitor, the U.S. is up 1-0 with about 6 minutes left in the first, but they're being outshot 7-2. But it's Team Canada's Brandon Hagel, a 2022 fourth-round pick, a 2024 fourth-round pick. That went to the Lightning. Over to the Blackhawks went Boris Tkachuk, Taylor Radish, a 2023 first-round pick, and a 2024 first-round pick. A big price tag for Brandon Hagel, but it worked out.
It did. Again, it's another one of these where BriseBois seems to give up, the farm for one player. And I want to read you something. A couple years ago, Craig Constance, NHL beat writer, released a book called The Franchise, where he talked with a bunch of NHL GMs. Julien BriseBois was one of them. It's actually the first chapter of the book. He sat down. This is post-COVID. It was actually right around the time of I think it was like 3 days before the Tanner Jeannot deal. But he sat down and he chatted with BriseBois kind of about his philosophy on being a GM. And BriseBois responded to a question in regards to trade deadline deals. And this has pretty much been his overriding philosophy since the Lightning flamed out in that 2018-19 season against Columbus, where BriseBois didn't really make an impact deal at the trade deadline. So this is what BriseBois had to say in regards to the trade deadline deals. Quote, "We got it to a place where I was more comfortable living with the regret of doing the trade and not having it work out than not doing the trade, not winning, and then forever asking myself, what if I'd done this trade? Would I be a Stanley Cup winner?" End quote. So that these big deals that BriseBois goes through, and where he's giving 17 draft picks and these young players like Taylor Radish and Boris Kachuk for one player. That's his philosophy. He wants to win, and he's not going to sit at the table and have second guesses about deals that he didn't do. So they go out and they get, this is after the 2 cups. They're trying to get back in there. Brandon Hagel was a young player with Chicago. One of the things to point out is the previous season, the Lightning and the Blackhawks were in the same division due to the realignment based on COVID. So they saw Brandon Hagel 6 times, and they really liked what they saw out of this kid. Young kid, skates hard, plays hard. He's got to fire up his ass the entire 60 minutes. And they really like that. So this is the deal they want to make. And now you look at this deal and they're like, wow, that's a lot of assets for Brandon Hagel. We kind of break it down into 2 parts. Brandon Hagel for the first round picks, the 2 first round picks. And then you have Kachuk and Radish going for the 4th round picks. It's kind of the way we've always looked at it over Raw Charge. And Kachuk and Radish were solid prospects. They always made our top 25 countdown. But they're kind of replaceable prospects in the Lightning system. They had a lot of players that were similar style players, so they could afford to get rid of them. They'd been with the Lightning for most of the season that year as rookies. And as you can see, again, they kind of bounced around the league since the trade. So they weren't what I would call impact players that you traded away here. Again, really good talent recognition on BriseBois and his staff's part. It's just like, these are players that we can afford to lose. And they did. Hagel's come in. He's been one of the best players on a team that doesn't have a lot of top-end prospects. You bring in Brandon Hagel, and he's been one of their top players over the last 2 years. So it's a really good, again, you're looking at what assets can I manage to get into the impact players that I need. And Hagel, this deal is just fantastic.
When you look at the performance of some of the other players in this trade, Taylor Radish would go to Chicago, had a 20-goal season in 2023, but after that, he has really disappeared from the score sheet. He went from Chicago, was signed by Washington for a year. Right now, he's with the Rangers, has a 2-year deal for about $3 million. 8 goals, 5 assists, 13 points in 54 games. Not exactly lighting up the scoreboard. And Justin, I'd have to say, this is an A+ for Tampa.
Yeah, and it was kind of panned at the time. They were like, "Why are you giving up all these assets for a guy who wasn't even, didn't even sign with, Buffalo let him go. Chicago was kind of burying him down a little bit, but sometimes you just got to wait things out and see how they play. And if you get the right player for the right style, the Lightning and Hagel is a perfect fit for the Lightning. And unlike Jeannot, he's been able to score goals, so it's definitely something nice. They've signed him to the long-term deal. He's one of their leaders in the clubhouse. And one of the other interesting aspects that I found from this trade is that of all those draft picks that went back and forth between the 2 teams, only one was used to actually select a player. And that was the 2023 first-round pick where Chicago drafted Oliver Moore, who's a pretty high-end prospect in their system. But if you look at the 2024 pick, Blackhawks used that as leverage to trade up to draft somebody. The 4th round picks, the Lightning traded theirs, the 2022 pick, to move up to the 3rd round as part of a package to take Lucas Edmonds. And then the 24 4th round pick, they actually traded that at the 2023 draft to get their original pick that they had sent over to Nashville in the Tanner Jeannot trade. They used that to get a 4th round pick in 2023. They got their pick back, used it on Jason Shogabay, who's had a light up system in college, light up season in college right now. So these draft picks that everyone places so much importance, that fans place so much importance on, they're just assets. They're just pieces to move around, pieces of the puzzle down the stretch. And GMs are starting to get much better at using these to bring in players that they need at the time, as opposed to using them as the lottery picks for future hope, for lack of a better word. So.
The final trade we're going to take a look at, Justin, is one at the time that you were not a big fan of, I know, but the Lightning always struggled to find that anchor goaltender. And I'm not sure this trade was meant to do that. I think initially it might have been more of a depth deal, but it was Ben Bishop going to Tampa and Corey Conacher and a 2013 4th round pick were heading to Ottawa. And Justin, as I mentioned, you hated this deal at the time. The Bolts really struck gold with this one.
They did. To give you a little idea how I felt at the time, I remember exactly where I was when I heard this trade. I was living in Chicago at the time. The deadline at that point had been, not super interesting. So The wife and I went out to grab a little lunch. We walked down the street in our lovely East Lakeview neighborhood down to a place called Kuma's 2. It's a burger bar. Anybody who's been to Chicago or lived there for any time, they know the original Kuma's, which is a legendary site in Chicago. This was their offspring. Within walking distance, excellent burger bar. It's kind of a little devil-themed bar at the time, which was amazing because they had the address of 666 West Diversey, which seemed fitting. And got a text on my phone that the Lightning had acquired Ben Bishop. That was the first. I think Bob McKenzie may have tweeted it to me, tweeted to me, I should say. That's the tweet I read. And then word came out that Corey Conacher had been the return, and I was not happy. I actually wrote at the time. I found an article I had posted on the time, and again, we're gonna go into the little quote section here. It's like, quote, however, there it was, anger. How could the Lightning trade one of their new fan favorites, the 5'0", 100 and nothing, undrafted scrapper, clawed his way into the NHL by outworking and outscoring everyone else. He's a Rookie of the Year candidate, for goodness sakes. The online fan base will no longer be able to use the hashtag death taxes and Conacher on our tweets anymore. The underside line of Conacher, Tyler Johnson, and Martin St. Louis will never exist again, all for another oversized goalie with potential. So yeah, that's.
Hey, I got to give you credit. You were willing to call yourself out after the wrong prediction.
Yeah. It's just, and this is one of those things. It's kind of interesting, when you're a fan of an up and coming team, some of these players just kind of, you develop an unhealthy relationship with them almost. Where Corey Conacher, that's exactly what he was. He's this undersized forward. He was undrafted. He was a free agent signing by the Lightning. He was the powerhouse behind that Norfolk Admirals team that ripped off a 28-game winning streak, won the Calder Cup. I mean, the kid put up like 80 points in 75 games or something like that, and then 15 points in the playoffs this year. And he was getting Rookie of the Year talk in that season with the Lightning. He wasn't putting up a ton of points, but he was, scoring. Death taxes Conacher thing, it had been born in Syracuse and Norfolk, where it just seemed like he scored every game. So the three inevitable things in life: death taxes and Corey Conacher. But he's kind of one of these fan bases, and you got to remember, this is right after, not that long after the Anders Lindback deal. Lindback was supposed to be our goaltender, and now the Lightning are going right back out. They're drafting another tall goaltender who hasn't proven himself as a starter yet, and they're giving up this guy that everyone thought was going to be a solid piece for the Lightning down the stretch. Part of that whole Tampa Cuse invasion with Tyler Johnson, Nikita Kucherov, Andre Palat, all those guys that have played for Cooper, and that were going to be the new basis of the team. So you're thinking, why are they trading for yet another number one goaltender? Yzerman finally got one right because Bishop ended up being that cornerstone for the Lightning. He held all these records before Vasilevsky came along. So not every initial reaction is a correct reaction. So this did end up being one of those cornerstone trades for the Lightning that set them up for success down, over the last decade or so.
I remember it was game 1 of the 2016 Eastern Conference Finals. Bishop got injured in the first period, and that led to Andrei Vasilevsky being the man for Tampa. He pretty much has had the net ever since then.
Yeah, and you wonder if Bishop wasn't entirely healthy during the 2015 Stanley Cup. If he had been 100%, would that outcome have been different? So yeah, he was. Bishop was the guy, and Vasilevsky does give him a lot of credit for helping him as a younger player. We all saw the writing kind of on the wall as Vasilevsky emerged as that, following that 2016 playoff run, that Vasilevsky was going to be the guy. And so the Lightning ended up trading Ben Bishop to the Kings, for a couple first-round picks, and then a couple of picks and Eric Chernak. So the deal worked out pretty well. But it was, Bish in Tampa was a really fun thing to watch.
Bishop would go on to have 3 20-win seasons with Dallas, but never reach the heights that he did with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, one of the things that Justin and I wanted to do is try to help all the Lightning fans out there travel to different destinations and come up with a game plan when they visit them. Now, so far, we've done St. Louis, Denver, Dallas, Winnipeg. In our 5th installment, we're going to go to a city that Justin lived for about 3-4 years.
I think it was about 4 years. Yeah.
We're going to go to one of the newest members of the NHL. They moved from Arizona. It is the Utah Mammoth. We're going to head over to Salt Lake City. Justin, again, this is your old home turf. Give us a little rundown on Salt Lake City.
Salt Lake City, it's one of my favorite cities that I've ever lived in. It gets a lot of people have a lot of thoughts about Salt Lake City, what it's like there. I will say it is a very nice downtown. I will also say that if you enjoy doing anything involving the outdoor life, I don't know if there's a better city in the U.S. when it comes to hiking, going to national parks, skiing, of course. Best snow on earth, I think, is what is on their license plate. So yeah, it's a great city. The downtown area is not very huge, but it is very compact. And if you're staying downtown, it's easy access to the Delta Center, which is where the Mammoth are playing right now. Now, of course, because my life goes the way it goes, I did not have the NHL there when I lived there. They literally moved there, I think, 2 months after I had left to pursue a new city. So I did not get to see any games over at the Delta Center, but do still have several friends there that attend games regularly. Some of the things you hear about the arena, the sightlines are not great. It is not a stadium or an arena that was built for hockey. It was built for the Jazz. It is a basketball arena. They are working on it, probably going to end up with a new stadium at some point, or the renovations that they're doing to the Delta Center will make it better for hockey. A lot of people have said this year it's a lot better than it was the first year. But as far as location, it's right in the central downtown area. There's several hotels within a block or two. And I know they got a big Marriott there. You have a big Hyatt, and then there's some of the smaller hotels all within, I would say, a 5 to 10 minute walk. So definitely stay downtown. Plenty of good food options as well. One of the surprising things, people may not think about it, but the beer in Salt Lake City is fantastic. You have a lot of great brewers down there. Epic Brewing being one of my favorites. So yeah, if you head down, there's just plenty of stuff to do in good old Salt Lake City. I know they're hosting an outdoor game. I believe it's the Winter Classic next year. So if you're in town for that, definitely, take advantage of it. Spend 3 or 4 days in Salt Lake City. You'll be surprised at how fun it is for a Midwest Mormon-based town.
Justin, the outdoor game, that's going to be played at the Utah football stadium, correct?
Yep, I believe it's at Rice-Eccles Stadium. One nice thing about Utah, the backdrops are tremendous. So you have the mountains in the background, the Wasatch Mountains behind Rice-Eccles. So if you're a college football fan, definitely go see a game there for the University of Utah. You also have Brigham Young, which is a 45-minute drive or so south down in Provo, which may have the most dramatic background of any football stadium in the U.S. with those mountains kind of surrounding the campus on 3 sides almost. So you don't have a bad view in those stadiums. So definitely recommend checking those out if you have the chance, if you're a college football fan.
Salt Lake City held the Olympics in 2002. All of the skiing events were held up in Park City. And Justin, I know you have some knowledge being up in Park City quite a bit. I spent a little time up there. They still have the bobsled track available to make runs. I think $75 at the time. It's probably a lot more expensive now, but it was really cool to be on. I was on the last seat of the bobsled. It was awesome. It was an awesome experience.
Yep. So yeah, up in Park City, as you're driving towards the mountain resorts, they do have the old training facilities. So it's the bobsled track and then also the ski jumps, which you can now slide down on an inflatable raft. We did do those. I did not do the bobsled track. I could not convince the folks I was with to go ahead and jump in. I think it was about $100 when I was there, if I remember correctly. But yeah, it's an experience unlike any other from what I've heard. The whole Olympic Center there is really nice. They have a lot of history about the Olympics in Salt Lake City. They have the bobsled track. They have those ski jumps that, like I said, they've turned into slides. There's a lot of zip lines there as well that you can go down. So it's really a whole kind of family-friendly atmosphere up there. And then you're minutes away from Park City, which Park City Mountain, Deer Valley, and all those ski resorts up there. So one of the beautiful things about Salt Lake City is if you are a skier, I think there's something like 5 major resorts within a 45-minute drive of downtown. And then you have the 5 national parks within 4 hours drive time as well. So like I said, it's just a great central hub location for outdoors, for doing things. The food is really good. Surprisingly, we had a lot of good meals there. So I know if you're a sushi fan, there's a place called Takashi, which is really, really good. Then you had Mexican, you had the Red Iguana, the best mole I've ever had. And it's just a little dive shack. But if you're a fan of Mexican food, especially mole sauces, then yeah, Red Iguana, it should be at the top of your list.
One other thing, getting to Salt Lake City is pretty easy. It's a Delta hub. So there's a lot of direct flights from a lot of different destinations to Salt Lake City. So keep that in mind if you decide to head out and see the Mammoth and the Lightning play. Now, Justin, we're going to be getting hot and heavy into NHL action starting on Wednesday. What's new over at Raw Charge?
We're kind of resting up a little bit before the big push down. So we will eventually get a couple of articles posted over the next couple of days, just finishing up the drafts on those, just going over the prospects. And then, again, still trying to put together Dominic James' piece. We'll have that up before Lightning action resumes. Then we'll be back into the groove as far as the previews, recaps, detailing the day-to-day life of your Tampa Bay Lightning, getting you up to date on all the injuries as the players start coming back. It looks some positive signs, it looks like, for Braden Point. I know Anthony Cirelli was on the ice. He still had that non-contact sweater on, and I think that's kind of the big deal. He did confirm it was a shoulder injury that he suffered in that outdoor game. So I think the next test for him will be that kind of along the boards contact to see how the shoulder head holds up. So expect him to be skating on the ice with the rest of his teammates as they all come back from the Olympics. And we're looking for a strong stretch run for the Lightning as they try and hold off everybody in their division and get one of those top seeds in the Eastern Conference.
Well, we're going to be back with you. We're going to drop the next pod up. We believe on Tuesday, we're going to preview the next two Bolts games. They take on Toronto. They're going to be facing them in Tampa, 7:30 start on Wednesday. And then they go on the road. They go to Carolina on Thursday at 7:00. Justin, you have a 2.5 week break. We talked about this schedule is going to be compressed. The Lightning immediately go back to back. A lot of their key players are coming back from the Olympics. That's going to be a pretty tall task.
Yeah, and it's against a Toronto team that's desperate to get back into the playoff picture. Carolina, which is always going to be a team that runs you ragged, and just with the style they play. So yeah, right out of the gates, it's going to be tough. And the Lightning, if they want to stay, up on top, they're going to have to get as many of these points out of the way as possible. So hopefully they can come out. There's no drag, no lag or anything like that, and they're on their A game to begin with.
Well, that's it for today for Backchecking the Bolts. We'll be back at it on Tuesday to preview the next two Lightning games against Toronto and Carolina. For the managing editor of Raw Charge, Justin Godfrey, I'm Jason Linkus. Have a great day, everybody, and go Bolts.
Go Bolts.
Thank you for listening to Backchecking the Bolts. We are free and available on all platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon, YouTube, and Deezer. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to subscribe and leave a review. You can follow Justin on Blue Sky at rawcharge.com. You can follow the show on X at Tampa_Bolts_pod and on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Backchecking the Bolts. If you're interested in advertising on the show or partnering with us, you can find more information in the show notes or email Jason at backcheckingthebolts@yahoo.com.